Let's start this section by a brief introduction to RESTful services, also called RESTful APIs. If you already know what REST is all about, feel free to skip this video. So earlier, at the beginning of the course, I introduced you to the client-server architecture. So most, if not all, applications we use these days follow this architecture. The app itself is the client or the front-end part under the hood. It needs to talk to the server or the backend to get or save the data. This communication happens using the HTTP protocol, the same protocol that powers our web. So on the server, we expose a bunch of services that are accessible via the HTTP protocol. The client can then directly call these services by sending HTTP requests. Now this is where REST comes into the picture. REST is short for Representational State Transfer. And I know it probably doesn't make any sense to you because it was introduced by a PhD student as part of his thesis. But the theory aside, REST is basically a convention for building these HTTP services. So we use simple HTTP protocol principles to provide support to create, read, update, and delete data. We refer to these operations altogether as CRUD operations. Now let's explore this convention using a real-world example. Let's say we have a company called Fairwheels for renting out cars. We have a client app where we manage a list of our customers on the server. We should expose the service at an endpoint like this. So fairwheels.com/API/customers. So the client can send HTTP requests to this endpoint to talk to our service. Now a few things about this endpoint you need to know. First of all, the address can start with HTTP or HTTPS. That depends on the application and its requirements. If you want the data to be exchanged on a secure channel, you would use HTTPS. After that, we have the domain of the application. Next, we have API. This is not compulsory, but you see a lot of companies follow this convention to expose their RESTful services. They include the word API somewhere in the address. It can be after the domain, or it can be a subdomain like API fairwheels.com. There is no hard and fast rule. After that, we have customers, which refers to the collection of customers in our application. In the REST world, we refer to this part as a resource. We can expose our resources, such as customers, cars, rentals, on various endpoints. So this is our endpoint to work with the customers. All the operations around customers, such as creating a customer or updating a customer, would be done by sending an HTTP request to this endpoint. The type of the HTTP request determines the kind of the operation. So every HTTP request has what we call a verb or a method that determines its type or intention. Here are the standard HTTP methods. We have get for getting data, post for creating data, put for updating data, and delete for deleting data. Now let's explore each of these using our customers example. To get the list of all customers, we should send an HTTP GET request to this address. Note the plural name customers. Here it indicates a list of customers. So when we send an HTTP GET request to this endpoint, our service should send us something like this. So we have an array of customer objects. If we want a single customer, we should include the ID of that customer in the address. Then our server would respond with a customer object like this. Now to update a customer, we should send an HTTP put request to this endpoint. And note that again, here we are specifying the ID of the customer to be updated. But also we should include the customer object in the body of the request. So this is a complete representation of the customer object with updated properties. We send this to the server, and the server updates the customer with a given ID according to these values. Similarly, to delete a customer, we should send an HTTP delete request to this endpoint. But here, we don't need to include the customer object in the body of the request. because all we need to delete a customer is an ID. And finally, to create a customer, we need to send an HTTP post request to this endpoint. Note that here, because we are adding a new customer, we are not dealing with a specific customer. We don't have the ID in the address. We are working with a collection of customers. So we are posting a new customer to this collection. And that's why we should include the customer object in the body of the request. The server gets this object and creates a customer for us. So this is the RESTful convention. We expose our resources, such as customers, using a simple, meaningful address, and support various operations around them, such as creating or updating them using standard HTTP methods. So throughout this section, you are going to learn how to use the Express framework to build a RESTful service for managing the list of customers. However, in this section, we won't be doing any database work because that will bring in additional complexity. Our focus will be purely on building HTTP services, and we will use a simple array in memory to keep the list of our customers. Later in the course, we will look at using a database.